ABC General Hospital spoilers for the next 2 weeks, February 23 to March 6. Show that Willow is dealing with more than she expected. She's stuck between pretending to be a rising political star and facing the harsh truth of the secrets she's kept, hidden under her carefully built life. Every morning she stood in front of the mirror putting on her makeup like clockwork, practicing the calm she needed to show everyone she was the ideal mother, the devoted wife, and strong enough to take on the empty congressional seat. Beneath that calm surface, her mind was twisting deeper into the darkness she had brought on herself, the day she gave Drew the medication that slowed his reflexes, weakened his body, and made sure he wouldn't get in the way of the future she planned to take. Every dose she made felt like carrying a secret sin she was too scared to say out loud. Still, she handed it over more calmly each time, telling herself it had to be done, that it was only for a while, and maybe even the right thing if it meant keeping her kids safe and holding on to her goals. Drew's empty eyes and shaky motions lingered in the corners of the house, a quiet reminder of just how far Willow had drifted already. She kept going, pushing her guilt down as she sat through strategy meetings, smiled for photos with her kids, and wrote speeches about integrity and resilience, speeches that felt bitter to say even though people clapped for her. But the lies weren't hidden in the shadows anymore. The lost key that threw Michael into chaos was a knot Alexis couldn't ignore, and she, quick and seasoned, had already started pulling at it. Alexis noticed things that others missed: how Willow flinched at certain questions, how her calm facade slipped with even the tiniest slip-up, and how she always seemed a bit too quick to point fingers at Chase. As Alexis put the pieces together, her worry grew into something much more urgent. If Willow had hidden that key, then she was mixed up in way more than just political games. She was twisting the evidence, laying traps, and changing the story to cover her own tracks. Alexis felt the weight of the truth, especially as Willow's public influence kept growing so fast. Every endorsement, every public appearance, and every headline naming her as the probable next person for the congressional seat just made it clear that Willow, it was getting more dangerous, not less. She was figuring out how to quiet her conscience, to cross lines without second thoughts, and to tweak every part of her story until it matched the image she wanted to show. As she kept pushing these manipulations, changing timelines, shifting suspicion, managing Drew's state, her moves spun a web so tangled and delicate that a single mistake could make it all fall apart. But Willow didn't seem scared of that collapse anymore. She seemed like she thought she could just run away from it all, outrun anyone who might find out the truth. But Alexis could see the tension rising, noticed how close Willow was to the breaking point, and felt a cold shiver that had nothing to do with politics. Once someone crossed certain moral lines, they usually didn't stop there. They just kept changing and explaining away things until there was nothing left to draw a line on. As Willow's crimes became harder to cover up and her thirst for power grew stronger, it was obvious the whole situation was getting out of control, even for Willow herself. Maxie could feel her indecision closing in on her like a tightening band, making it harder to breathe every time she was left alone with her thoughts. The talks she kept having with Nathan weren't just casual chats about their past or the what-ifs anymore. They hit deep, bringing up feelings she'd worked to hide away. Nathan felt different now. There was a new intensity in him, something born from all he had been through, shaped by loss and sacrifice, revealing a side of himself she hadn't really seen before. He looked familiar, but something about him had changed. It feels familiar, but there's still something strangely unknown about it. Every time he spoke, Maxie felt like the ground beneath her was shifting, like the universe was quietly moving parts of her life around into a new setup she hadn't asked for but couldn't ignore anymore. Spinelli, on the other hand, stayed calm, kind, and sure in a way that you'd think would make Maxie feel better, but instead it just made her more confused. He told Lulu without a doubt that Maxie would pick Nathan in the end, certain that her heart had made up its mind well before she even realized it. He noticed a thread between Maxie and Nathan that he couldn't match, but he still clung to hope because loving Maxie had always meant embracing the unpredictable twist of her feelings. Lulu listened closely, worried that Spinelli's faith might end up hurting him in a way he couldn't fix. But she also felt there was some truth in what he said. No matter how much Maxie pushed to keep going, a part of her was always stuck looking back. The more Maxie looked closely at Nathan's changes, the clearer it became that these weren't just skin-deep differences. Nathan came back with a seriousness that seemed to draw her in, a calm strength that made her question everything she thought she wanted. His struggles had forged a new kind of strength in him, but also brought out a fragility, a mix that could upset the balance she had spent so long trying to keep. She saw how he hesitated when tough questions came up, and how his eyes stayed on hers not with desire, but with a kind of knowing, like he envisioned a future together that she didn't have the courage to admit. These changes shook her on a deep level and made her rethink the story she'd been telling herself. They made her face the chance that she was standing right at the edge of a story she believed was finished a long time. Ago. It wasn't just Nathan drawing her closer, it was also the person she turned into whenever she was around him. That realization scared her more than anything else. With Spinelli, she found stability, kindness, and a future she could count on, all grounded in loyalty. With Nathan, she felt a deep intensity and passion, along with an emotional clarity she hadn't realized she was missing. Nathan's changing personality reflected the changes she was noticing inside herself, and those inner shifts became harder to overlook as time went on. Maxie started to feel like she was about to change in a way she never wanted. Like life was shifting her world around and nudging her toward choices she didn't feel ready for. The pressure inside her kept building as she realized she might really be ready to risk it all, her stability, her relationship, even who she was, just to see if Nathan could be the chance she needed. She wasn't just choosing between two men. It felt like standing at a fork in the road, each path leading to a completely different future tugging her both ways. Spinelli stood for the feeling of safety, for a love that stayed with her even through all the chaos and tough times. Nathan stood for a love that had changed and grown stronger through time and hardship, a kind of love you couldn't I really expect, but that felt deeply real. She felt a shift in her heart, like the start of a change she couldn't run away from. Maxie realized that if she moved closer to Nathan, it would mean changing a lot of other things in her life too. She knew she had to change what people expected of her, let go of old habits she no longer fit, and face truths she had been putting off for way too long. As Spinelli kept quietly trusting that her heart would guide her back to Nathan, Maxie noticed that even the people who cared about her the most could feel the change happening within her before she was ready to speak it out loud. She didn't hesitate because she was confused anymore. It was because she realized that making a choice meant giving up the identity she had held onto as her only source of steady ground. Now she found herself facing something much bigger than just a romantic problem. She was on the edge of starting over, pulled toward a future where she had to be brave enough to face the wave of feelings Nathan's return stirred up inside. To do. Cullum's questioning stuck with Jason, making him feel a weight he couldn't shake off. It was like the danger around them was changing, becoming sharper, more deliberate, and a lot closer than anyone wanted to admit. When he finally reached Britt, he shared every detail with the calm care she trusted the way Cullum spoke. The questions that seemed to show he knew more than he should, and how his eyes stayed fixed like he was already planning Jason's next step before it happened. Britt took it all in, that usual mix of fear and determination, feeling the shake under her ribs as she braced herself. They started thinking carefully about what to do next, knowing well that one wrong move could cost them way more than just their freedom. For Britt, the threat hit close to home. For Jason, it was a clear sign that his past and present were crashing together in ways he couldn't dodge anymore. Jason knew the next person he had to talk to was Sunny. Their talk was tense, filled with the kind of urgency that comes from men who'd been through too many storms to take a new one lightly. Sunny sat quietly, taking in everything Jason shared about what Cullum said, what he hinted at, and what he didn't say, because usually the real danger was hidden in the things left unsaid. Sunny knew right away that this wasn't simply about Jason being under surveillance. It was about Port Charles being shaken up behind the scenes, with forces moving in the shadows that weren't connected to Cyrus or Pikeman or any enemy they'd ever dealt with before. This was personal, planned out, and involved people Sunny never thought would get mixed up in such a complicated mess. Whatever Cullum wanted, he wasn't done, not with Jason, not with Britt, and definitely not with Sunny. At the same time, Sidwell started showing a colder, tougher side, something Laura had really hoped she wouldn't have to face. She thought she could handle him, that her political know-how and strong values would sway the choices he made. But Sidwell wasn't the type to react to idealism. He responded to leverage. He pushed Laura to change her plans entirely. Laura wanted to put Alexis forward to take over Drew's spot in Congress, thinking Alexis would bring steadiness and honesty to the role. But Sidwell had his own plans. He wanted control. And part of that was forcing Laura to spill Willow's name at the next press conference, a reveal that would shake up the political scene and bring consequences Laura wasn't ready to face. Alexis could tell something was off even before Laura said a word, but she wasn't ready for the awkward surprise that Sidwell had thrown their way. Afterward, she asked Laura questions, trying to figure out what was really going on. But even though Alexis was frustrated, she didn't realize there were bigger things happening behind the scenes. She had no idea what kind of pressure Laura was facing, or that Willow was being used like a pawn in a game controlled by forces way beyond the mayor's office. The confusion made Alexis feel even more uneasy, and it soon became obvious that they were trying to force her into a part she never agreed to take on. At the same time, Lucas was caught up in his own storm. Finding that shocking information kicked off a series of events he didn't expect. And when he confronted Marco to get answers, it only made their shaky trust even worse. Marco paused, stumbling as he tried to explain why he'd kept some things back. But Lucas kept at it. Pushed on by more than just his job, he had this gut feeling that Laura and Britt were in way deeper trouble than anyone guessed. He could feel the threads linking these problems pulling tighter, creating a net set to catch the people he cared about most. Every time Marco dodged the question, Lucas became more sure that time was slipping away from them quicker than they realized. Lucas wasn't only after the truth. He was trying to save them from something growing faster underneath. He could sense Britt's vulnerability, Laura's political trouble, and the growing ripple Sidwell's influence was starting to cause. Every time he learned something new, He had to change how he saw the whole thing and rethink who was trustworthy and who might actually be against them. As the danger grew, Lucas's determination grew right alongside it. He realized he was walking into dangerous ground. But he couldn't just watch while the people he cared about were getting closer to a crisis they had no way to face. Valentin and Carly's shaky alliance had always been about survival, not trust. Now, though, it was about to fall apart as danger came closer in ways they never saw coming. For weeks, Valentin stayed hidden, depending on Carly to cover for him while he collected the information he needed and waited patiently for the right time to fight back against those closing in on Port Charles. They came together in a way nobody expected, knowing deep down that sometimes staying alive means working with someone who used to be your enemy. Carly took the chance because she trusted Valentin's warnings and felt the storm around them was more than just old grudges. But risk has a way of catching up with you, and now it was time to pay the price. People had started hearing whispers, little bits of talk, random details. Strange coincidences that hinted someone might have seen signs of where Valentin was. And the creepiest thing was that these clues could have come from someone who didn't even mean to be involved. Rocco, the young boy, not realizing the risk around Valentin, might have accidentally let something slip during a casual talk, maybe naming a place too loud or sharing a memory for the wrong people nearby. Kids usually don't get how serious secrets can be, and just one careless slip could undo months of careful effort. Carly noticed the change before Valentin did. She felt it in the way some people began asking strange questions, how the room went quiet when she entered, and how the security around Sunny's world suddenly got tighter in ways that didn't make sense for any usual danger. Valentin felt the pressure tightening around him more and more as the hours went by. He had been through enough enemies and betrayals to not overlook the signs when they appeared. A phone ping in the wrong place, strange footsteps near the safe house, and suddenly losing contact with someone he trusted. Any one of these things might not mean much, but all of them happening together was something he couldn't just ignore. He started to see that his hiding spot wasn't really a safe place anymore. It was turning into a trap. Even worse, he realized that if his location had gotten out, Carly was in danger too, just because she was linked to him. Their partnership was starting to cause problems, risking not just his family but hers too. The idea that Carly might suffer because she helped him stirred a tension inside him he just couldn't hold back anymore. Carly kept her cool, but a quiet fear started to crawl under her skin as she began to understand what was going on. She went over every recent moment with Rocco, thinking about every time he'd been close to the safe house and every question he'd thrown her way. She recalled the innocent excitement in his eyes when he talked about the secret place where she had been helping someone, not knowing that this little detail could reveal it all. Carly had always trusted her gut to keep her loved ones safe, but now she found herself needing to look out for someone she wasn't sure she could trust, someone whose very presence was already shaking up her life in ways she hadn't expected. But she just couldn't pull away now. Not if walking away would just lead Valentin right into the hands of the people after him. As it became more obvious they would be found out, Valentin and Carly had to make faster choices and face tougher realities. Valentin started getting ready to move, working through backup plans he hoped would never actually come into play. Carly felt caught in the middle, unsure whether to protect Rocco from feeling guilty or to face the fallout from his accidental mistake. With every breath, the risk grew, turning from something far off to a real pressing danger. And buried in that growing tension was the cold realization that once Valentin's whereabouts were revealed, nothing would ever be the same, neither their alliance nor the shaky balance of power in Port Charles. And definitely not the feeling of safety Carly had held onto so tightly. Revealing Valentin's hiding place would send a shockwave through everything, shaking up alliances and sparking fights that had been quietly building for a while. The real question now wasn't if the truth would get out, but when it would and what the fallout would be afterward. As the shadows grew darker around them, Valentin and Carly both knew that their next move might be what decided if they got out of this fight alive or ended. Rack up as victims in a game that didn't leave room for error.